And sometimes they will tell you, hey, I think your decision to minimize risk in this situation, not wrong, but like it's not necessary because we're willing to accept a certain risk. And so then, you at the end of the day, they're the ones who drive the business. So sometimes you do have to let them make those decisions for you.
Okay, we're back. Got your coffee, Sergiy?
Yeah, ready to go.
Okay. For those of you who just found us, this is the part 2 of my conversation with Sergiy Bondarenko. Sergiy is the senior manager, marketing operations at Compass Digital in Vancouver, Canada. If you haven't seen episode 12 yet, I strongly recommend you go and check it out. But do that after this because this episode works perfectly on its own. As I mentioned, this is the episode 13 of The Ordinary, and now we're taking it further into a topic that Sergiy has a rare amount of experience with, acquisitions. Sergiy, you spent almost 7 years in PE-backed companies that grew through acquisitions. At Kaseya, you led MOPs across 3 business units and migrated all of them to a new platform. That's a pretty intense thing to have on your resume.
It is. It's a lot of learning, a lot of work.
Let's start with the big picture. When you hear we've acquired a new company, what's the first thing that goes through your mind as a MOPS person? Be honest.
Now, I would say, well, here we go again. We have the playbooks. I guess, yeah, here we go again is basically the first thing that goes through my mind.
But what's the first thing you do, like practically, like day 1, week 1?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot depends on what's going on at the company, what are sometimes the terms of the acquisition. So the first thing that you do is you meet with your kind of direct stakeholders who usually have more, they have more knowledge about what's happened because they were in the room when the terms were being signed, and they will explain to you kind of the lay of the land, what's the company, like not the stuff you see on the website, but they will actually explain to you the lay of the land of like, all right, so this happened, and they will tell you who you should talk to on the side, like the company that you've acquired. Usually, yeah, that's what you want. So typically, you'll have your playbook, so you want to know who do you talk to about the marketing stuff? Who do you talk to about the CRM, IT, stuff like that? So you get the lay of the land there. And one important thing that you do want to clarify, because it will depend on company to company. Some companies where, they acquire a business, everything is very clear. They've already explained something that like the process, maybe like even on a high level, the process of what's going to be happening through an acquisition. Sometimes they will not have explained it, and you want to know about it, because if you don't know and then you jump straight into talking to the stakeholders on a business that's coming in and you start kind of jumping into like, doing discovery with them, sometimes you can like step on, they'll be like, whoa, like, what do you mean? Like, this is happening. Like, I thought like, this is gonna happen like this way. And like, you guys are really like gonna be like learning here from us, and like, or like, we're gonna be running 2 systems at the same time. There's not gonna be, so like, you never really want to jump in with an assumption. I've done that. It was a big lesson learned. Do not like, so always like that that's the people side is like, yeah, so you always get the intel. What do people actually know about, like what does this mean from team's perspective, right? Because sometimes there's like sensitive things as well, right? I mean, it's what's going to happen to some of the team on that end as well, like what's the plan for the integration and like stuff like that. So yeah, it's the people side is probably the most sensitive thing. But yeah, so in the first kind of week, and then also with your executive team, you align on the timeline as well, because they will often have a target in mind by which they want to integrate it. Believe it or not, sometimes it will depend. Like sometimes it will be, okay, you give us the shortest timeline, the quickest way we can execute it. And then it will just depend on the business side, the complexity of their processes, stuff like that. Because sometimes you're acquiring a rather small company, it's not as complex, right? Sometimes it will be a delay. So sometimes they will say, hey, the terms of the acquisition is that they're only joining us from like next year. And then you have like, 6 months to do all of that. And there's like a lot of nuances that way. So you want to align on that timeline. once you have that kind of understanding from that perspective, from there on, so that's like your first week or two, then you start connecting with the business on that side. And I have like a set, like of kind of playbooks that I follow. Like I have like a discovery document that you basically set a meeting and you kind of go, we can go into details there, but like you basically start doing your discovery calls really to learn what you need to know, and then you kind of take it from there. Usually also in my experience, there's going to be like a dedicated team as well. Like we typically had like a change management lead or like project manager who also managed all the moving pieces of the integration, because you got to always remember marketing ops is one piece of it. There's IT, there's CRM, right? There's sales ops. So there's also going to be someone who's going to be managing a lot of that. So usually sometimes you may want to hold off to talking to anyone until they've done something. So again, just it'll depend on like the company that you're working at and how it works. So yeah.
Yeah. But you migrated 3 business units from HubSpot and Close.io to Salesforce and Marketo. What's the biggest learnings from doing that in your perspective?
Yeah, the biggest learning is this is probably the best opportunity you will have to actually have dedicated time, not only to like figure out how to map everything that's coming over from the acquired business, but also like to audit your existing processes and to make them better. Because usually in our day-to-day, we're always doing campaigns, we're like integrating new tech stack, blah, blah, blah. You always have to carve out time to optimize. This is like a very perfect, almost like an excuse to dedicate time and to say like, hey, like as part of this, we're going to be optimizing the, like the lead processing chain on our end, because it will help us integrate this business better. And it's a perfect opportunity to like implement something new that you didn't have, you kept delaying because it meant you had to change a lot of moving pieces. Always embrace this, because that's like, it's a perfect number. And that's why I love it, because like it's a perfect excuse to do that. And typically nobody will even like know or care, but it's great. And then you can present it as a big win as well. So it's amazing that way. And I love it. Secondly, the second biggest learning is that every business that's coming over, there's always going to be an idea that you can take from them and apply to the rest of the business. Definitely make sure you like don't discount some things that they're doing as like, oh, like this is not best practice or whatever. Like they will always be doing something that's interesting or a playbook that you can learn from and expand into your like joint tech stack. And then you can also then partner up with your counterparts, maybe who manage other business units, and tell them, hey, I think like on our core system level we should do what these guys are doing that I'm helping to integrate, because it'll help us, I don't know, save time or avoid the sync backlog between Marketo and Salesforce, stuff like that. Like it's yeah, like that's the second biggest learning. Always do that. And then the third biggest learning is the system part is pretty easy. I mean, like sometimes, yeah, you will always have weird things, but people management side is always kind of the most important, and like that's the part that you should plan to spend more time around. Like technical side of things you can always figure out, but yeah, as long as you bring people along on the journey, everybody will always be receptive to do things better. Especially if you're acquiring a smaller company, I found they will always be open to admit, hey, like we are not doing this in the best practice matter at all, please help us fix it. So I was surprised, because I thought there would always be resistance, but actually people are very receptive to your suggestions and to help it make it better for them.
Regarding the change management on the people side, as you just mentioned, the employees in the acquired company, like they for sure have their own routines and tools, and and how do you handle that? What has been the biggest resistance that you've encountered?
Yeah, the resistance is, I wouldn't describe it as a resistance, but more so people, especially what I found at smaller companies, sometimes these companies have existed for a long time, and sometimes they were run like almost like a family business. So don't discount the fact that people have attachment to things that they've built, like almost on the personal level. So even if you don't mean it that way, but sometimes, you will discount what they've done and from like, oh, this is not a best practice sort of thing. And like, I always try to be sensitive about that because people take pride in their work, especially like in those kinds of environments. So that's the first thing you want to realize. The second I've sort of mentioned already is at the same time, they will be receptive, like, so you kind of, when you do discovery, it'll organically come up, you can kind of mention jokingly, oh, I've been noticing that your UTM parameter is a little all over the place. And very often people will be like, oh yeah, this is a mess. Please help us fix it. Stuff like that. So they will always be open to you coming in and like, as a almost like as a consultant. So you should act as a consultant to kind of help them fix something. And then thirdly, like I said, bring them along on the journey and make sure they're part of a process. I mean, first of all, they have to be. And second of all, you will have to explain why things are happening in a certain manner. Sometimes you will have some flexibility. Always be upfront about things that are not flexible. And then, if it causes like resistance, right, then you can explain why. And then sometimes you can tell them, well, you can go and talk to that person about this because this is outside of my control, for example, right? So it helps like that. But yeah, in terms of that, the biggest resistance is, I guess, is also the unknown. So be the agent of clarity. That's kind of how I would describe it is, because it's when you imagine on your end, like I've never been on a part where the company was kind of swallowed up by a larger company, but like putting yourself in those shoes is like, it's unknown. I was part of this company. Now I'm part of this large organization. No idea what's going to happen to me, to my job. Are they even gonna so you have to think from this unknown is just causing a lot of stress altogether. So just be an agent of clarity and change. And I think from that perspective, and then, sometimes you will have some uncomfortable situations. Sometimes people will and I've seen it happen. People will overreact. People will be sometimes causing you roadblocks. So sometimes you will then have to kind of work with them, but sometimes you will have to have difficult conversations and bring it to your stakeholders and say like, hey, sometimes this person is not really, helping much. And so that happens too.
Yeah, I guess. Has there been anything that has surprised you about the human side of acquisitions?
So one sort of mentioned, people will always be receptive for you to improve things. Like I always get surprised by how much maybe. I guess by now I shouldn't be, but like sometimes to an extent where you start talking about something and they'll be like, oh yeah, great. Yeah, let's do that. And then secondly, I think that on the people side, we underestimate again, the impact of the unknown. So it's maybe not much of a surprise, but more so an observation and like surprise of how the human mind works is that you find that people over time kind of start accepting certain things. Even sometimes like originally you will have resistance, but over time, like as you explain, as long as you're clear, like people start accepting. So sometimes like in your own mind, you're an enemy for yourself, thinking, how are they going to react to something? Is it too much change? But you'll be surprised to what extent people are willing to collaborate. So I think, probably that, but sorry, it's kind of like not as much of a clear answer, but I would say, like it's the surprise for me. It's how people can be receptive to things that you suggest, I guess.
When it comes to the executive side, the leadership, how do you sell your decisions upward in these acquisitions?
That's a good question. So I think from a very foundational level, of course, and this is where you usually partner up with like a project manager who sometimes leads. I mean, you're a project manager in the MOps space, but in my experience, there's usually like this dedicated project manager just for like the A project as a whole, and they will always have like executive check-in calls where you always kind of bring it to them, like to walk them through the decisions that you make. And I think when you sometimes have to the usual thing that comes up when what you have to sell them on is you need more time. And usually they will always be like very cagey about that. And for a good reason. There's sometimes pressure from external side of things to like get something by a certain date. So the way you sell it is you first of all never wait until the very last moment, because then if they get blind, nobody on the executive side likes to be blindsided. Always bring up even like what they call, amber flags, red flags, like, and your project manager will help you like raise things as early as possible and flag them as risks. Be upfront and transparent. And if you think that, the decisions that you're making, you can explain them like, from like a risk management perspective. And sometimes they will tell you, hey, I think your decision to minimize risk in this situation, not wrong, but like it's not necessary because we're willing to accept a certain risk. And so then, you at the end of the day, they're the ones who drive the business. So sometimes you do have to let them make those decisions for you. But on the flip side, you are also there for a reason. So sometimes you do have to be upfront on certain non-negotiables. So if you need more time, what I usually see, for example, is like, we need more time to work out why this database has so many people who have unsubscribed. Like there was like one situation I was facing because, again, that's a compliance issue, right? And so you have to tell them like, hey, it's an important topic. Like, we're seeing signs where some people are tagged as unsubscribed, but they shouldn't be. We need more time to investigate and what's happened. Like, we are suspecting that it's a system issue, but before we act on basically resubscribing everyone to our lists, we have to confirm. And so we need more time. And like, if there's resistance from that, you then as a professional, you tell, well, like, look, this creates a compliance issue. We cannot risk that. It's like some things are like not acceptable and they will be fine with that. So you have to be like, again, just never blindside them on something is, I think, the most important thing. From there, I think that every stakeholder, they will have a conversation with you. Like normally, it's they're people at the end of the day. They will understand, but just be firm on those parts that I've described and be upfront.
So my last question for this second episode, like if you were to create a MOPS acquisition playbook, what would the 3 most important points be in that playbook?
First point, so I would say first step, discovery. Have a document ready that you always lean on, like whenever you handle it. I have one. I've kind of developed it over the years. I keep it as part of my documentation, and you build on top of it. You will always have flexibility to add things. Project to project varies, but always have that discovery document. Discovery is the most important part. And so part of the playbook is overspend time on discovery, because then on your step 2 is when you start doing your plan and you start inventorizing stuff. So again, part of a playbook is like inventorizing and knowing where everything lives, building your inventory. Again, it's kind of part of a discovery, but I think you will save a lot of time building inventory if at the discovery stage you learn about all the closets that are hidden, not everything is documented, blah, blah, blah. So step 2 is then, like I said, you've done discovery. Then at the step 2, when you do inventory, you're going to save a lot of time there. And then step 3 is then you have your migration plan, and part of the playbook is your migration plan synchronizes with the CRM plan. So that's one of the things that I always I'm not rigid, but like I'm very strict on. Like I think that it's extremely important to align whatever you do on the marketing ops side with the CRM. If things are going to be delayed on the CRM, I tend to prefer to delay them on the MOPS side, because it's part of the overall process. And sometimes folks will try to rush you, but part of the playbook is that your plan has to align then with the larger CRM plan, and the dependencies there will be like very evident, and they will impact your timelines. That's kind of like your step 3 is like, once you've built the plan, then align it with the CRM timeline. From there, again, it's like it comes down to having like your kind of spreadsheet template of steps that you always have to take. There's always steps that you have to take during each migration. I've been contemplating actually to make some of these things like writing a blog post or something, because there's like lots of like, there's like things like that you always have to do, like dealing with IT, like moving email sender information, stuff like that. But that's kind of like the minutia of it. But I think step 3 of the playbook is have that plan, have a template. You will always adjust it for a specific situation, but you always want to align it with the CRM. And then the next step is going live. Always plan for when you go live, when you do migration, you kind of move over database, you do a cutover when, like your leads on the website start flowing from one system into a new system. Always plan for a hypercare period. So when things start moving, like you will always have an intense period of the first 2-3 weeks when you will want to address issues very quickly. So always plan for that. You will because you will have to jump on things immediately. And then over time, things move into kind of business as usual once you're out of that hypercare session. That's kind of my approach to it. Again, there's a lot more details that we can spend probably hours and hours on going through templates, but on a high level, that's kind of how it looks like.
Yeah, we could probably revisit actually the acquisition playbook sometime later. We can discuss that if you're up.
Absolutely. Would be happy.
Sergiy, this has been a really great talk with you. 2 episodes done at once. And I feel we could easily do 2 more talking about these topics here. Final question. And it's a fairly easy one. If people want to get in touch with you or follow what you're up to, where do they find you?
So I've been a bit lazy. I don't have a website, so LinkedIn is probably best. So you can just type in Sergiy Bondarenko on LinkedIn. I would say LinkedIn is the best way. I'm pretty receptive, open to messages, to connect with people, exchange ideas. And that's where I sometimes will post things, although I'm not very active sometimes with posting my thoughts, but sometimes I will. So that's the best channel to connect with me. But at some point, I'm thinking to create a bit of a dedicated kind of domain space for myself. So stay on the lookout for that, but it'll be on LinkedIn as well.
Cool. Thank you for joining, Sergiy. To those of you watching or listening, please subscribe to the podcast or even share it with someone sitting with a tech stack that's grown a bit too large. And remember, sometimes the best tool is the one you already have. See you next time. One last time. Thank you, Sergiy, for being here.
Thanks for having me.